What's up, guys? It's Dan from Coin Bureau Trading, back at it again with another crypto market update. Today we've got XRP, Stellar, and Hedera. I'm sure you're all wondering what these cryptos are up to. Why are they pumping? How high could they go? Are they going to fall lower again? If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell. Before we get started, do keep in mind that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's just my analysis of these cryptos. Your analysis could be different, and if it is, that's awesome, because the more difference of opinion that we have, the better traders and the better investors we're all going to become. With that being said, guys, of course, first we have to address why the crypto market is pumping, why XRP, XLM, and HBAR are all pumping. Of course, that's because the Trump administration, quote unquote, paused the tariffs on all these countries, basically, except for China, where they raised them. But the point being, I guess, is that a lot of people are saying that this is a pause. It's not really a pause because the tariff rate is still 10%. But for sake of simplicity, we can just say that all this concerns around tariffs, most of those concerns are now gone, at least in the short term here. So of course, markets are rallying on that. And it's pretty crazy that Trump actually posted telling people to buy like 3 hours before he announced that he would be, let's say, pausing these tariffs, which again, it's not technically a pause, but let's not get into the details there. In my personal opinion, guys, I actually think that crypto potentially, I think there's a pretty good chance that XRP, XLM, and HBAR are all going to go higher today, as well as the crypto market more broadly. And that's because of the inflation print, basically at 8:30 a.m. EST. So roughly, I mean, at the time of shooting now, it's in roughly 5 hours time, I think. Basically in a few hours time here. By the time you see this video, you'll probably be, I don't know, like 2 hours just before the CPI, assuming the video is pushed at the right time. But anyways, CPI later today is probably going to come in lower than expected. This is according to real-time data from Trueflation. Last time they nailed the CPI call. This time they're calling for 2.5%. Most investors are expecting 2.6%. So if we do see inflation come in a little bit lower than expected, that's going to be bullish, because it's going to suggest that the Fed is going to cut more rates. When at their meeting in May. Right now, the markets aren't really pricing that in, but if we do see a sharp drop in inflation, which, falling from 2.6 to 2.5 might not be that big of a drop, but who knows, maybe the surprise could be even lower. Trueflation's data for March actually suggests that inflation was below 2%. So I think that their 2.5% forecast here is them being very careful and very conservative. They're going to say, oh, we forecast something that was slightly lower, and if it comes in at like 2.2 or 2.3, then they can be pleasantly surprised. It's kind of like, better not to undershoot too much, if that makes any sense, just to keep their legitimacy. Of course, Trueflation is basically this tool. I mean, it's been around, I think, for a couple of years now, but I've seen it used by more and more macro analysts that I follow, which is why I've started following it more recently. I did follow it in the previous CPI print, and that's where they nailed it. I don't know how they've performed in previous CPI prints before that. But the fact that many macro analysts I follow are following Trueflation, using their data, and more, relying on their insights, suggests that the data that they're working with is increasingly accurate. But of course, it is worth pointing out that something like Trueflation, it's an indicator, let's say, that's still work in progress. Let's say, I'm sure that they're still refining their models and everything behind the scenes. So that's why you're not seeing it being used by everyone. That's one question actually one of our members of the Coin Bureau Club asked: if this Trueflation thing is so accurate, why is everyone not using it? Basically because it's brand new, but more and more people are starting to use it, which does suggest that it is accurate and is becoming more accurate over time. So assuming we get a CPI print that's lower than expected today, which I do think there's a good chance of that happening, then this kind of creates the macro conditions required for crypto catalysts to actually move prices. That's the one thing we've been missing over the last couple of months. We had all these bullish crypto announcements, but nothing would move the price, and that's because the macro backdrop was super bearish. But now, with this kind of sort of clarity around tariffs, and potentially with this lower than expected inflation print coming in today, that will create a better macro backdrop, basically, for crypto catalysts to matter. And of course, the top one to watch there, in XRP's case, I would argue, is the spot XRP ETF, which, in my opinion, I think we're going to see a lot of spot altcoin ETFs approved in the coming weeks, because that's because the SEC finally has a new chair, Paul Atkins. He's believed to be pro crypto, and that's primarily because Hester Pierce, who's another commissioner at the SEC who's super pro crypto, she basically said that he's pro crypto and he's the best person for the job. So, hopefully we're not walking into another Gary Gensler type situation. But in all seriousness, I do think that this guy was picked for a reason. He probably is, substantially more pro crypto. I don't think Trump would have nominated him if that wasn't the case. And Hester, again, has said some really good things about him. So it sounds like this is going to be the guy basically signing off. I mean, I know it's not, I don't think it's technically the SEC chair that signs off on the spot ETF approvals, but they do have a seat at the table. And this is going to potentially make things work more smoothly in the SEC as it relates to pro crypto policy. The other thing I need to point out here, guys, is that of course some of you might say, "Oh, XRP already has an ETF." Of course, it's technically different. It's not a spot ETF, but the ETF that did launch here, basically yesterday, I think, or a couple days ago. And this ETF apparently did way better than expected. I was also seeing some reporting that in terms of the volume, it did very well, and that's a very good sign because it shows that there's demand for XRP, which in my view increases the chances that a spot XRP ETF will be approved. Because if they can see that investors want this product, then that kind of puts pressure on the SEC to approve that ETF sooner, if that makes any sense. Anyways, guys, moving on now to XRP's chart. This is where things get very interesting. As you guys know, like we've been looking at altcoins this week through the lens of RSI. I use RSI a little bit different than Aaron does. I look more at like the structure and the shape of the RSI rather than like things like divergences. I don't necessarily care too much about that kind of stuff. I just like to see like parallels and patterns, right? So in this case, guys, we can see that in the previous cycle, XRP saw a basically nice, initial leg higher in late 2020. Basically there was like one peak and then a second peak. And here we can see that arguably XRP has only had its first peak so far, which means that a second peak is coming. Given that this first peak was quite high, somewhere in the 90 handle range, it's possible that the next peak will come in a little bit lower. That would be a divergence similar to what we saw in the previous cycle, and that would foreshadow, of course, an XRP price drop, which is probably going to happen. But the point being, guys, is that back here you can see that even though the second RSI peak was not as big as the first, the price rally was substantially larger. And this is exactly what I think we're going to see for XRP here. As I mentioned in a previous video, I do think that XRP is going to get at least around to $5, and maybe it'll touch like 5.5 or $6. Maybe that's a level that'll be hit for a day or an hour, or who knows, maybe even like 1 second, right? But to get somewhere in the $5 range, I would say between $5 and $7 for XRP to at least wick up into that range sometime over the summer, which is when I think the cycle top will be hit. I think there's a very high chance of that happening, and the RSI again is conducive to that. Again, like assuming history repeats, we have a first peak, second peak. So far, we've only seen the first peak for XRP, and I do believe that second peak is going to happen sometime over the summer, and I do think that XRP is going to get up at least into that $5 range, if not potentially, wicking into that $6 or $7 zone. But I would say $5 is realistic as a conservative estimate. And who knows? Yeah, maybe we could see something closer even to $6. Just literally just using basic technical analysis here on like back of the hand math. Just real quick, guys, just for your interest, like without having to draw anything out, you guys might remember the way that I was showing the charts before. We have a starting point here, so it might give some people PTSD, but we have a starting point here of 50 cents, resistance, let's say somewhere around $3. This is on the monthly chart, of course. The difference between those two levels is $2.5, which would foreshadow a $5.5 cycle top for XRP, just using the basic technical analysis here on the monthly chart. And I do think that's a realistic target for XRP in the coming months. Anyways, guys, if you are trading XRP or any other crypto for that matter, do take advantage of our Binance deal. We have a 20% trading fee discount with up to $600 in bonuses. That's the biggest deal. That's the biggest discount you can get on Binance. It's available exclusively through the Coin Bureau. Down in the description, all you have to do is click that link. It'll take you to a page that looks like this. Just enter your email or phone number. Signing up literally takes 2 or 3 minutes. It's super simple. Binance is the world's largest crypto exchange by users. They have all the cryptos you could possibly need. Yeah, guys, you get a trading fee discount. We get a cut of your trading fees, and the exchange gets a new user. That's how we make money. We're not like, paid shills or anything like that. It's a win-win-win for everyone. And again, those deals are completely free. So do take advantage of them using the link down in the description. We don't just have Binance, but we have other exchanges as well, if you prefer to use other exchanges or can't use Binance for whatever reason. Moving on now to Stellar. So this is where things, now I'm getting a little bit more speculative, but there's one headline that everyone has completely forgotten, and I kind of wish I had included this at the beginning of the video, because it's something that could potentially pertain more to XRP. But I do think it's something that's going to apply to many altcoins, and that's that U.S. federal agencies have to report their crypto holdings, meaning their altcoin holdings, to the Treasury Department by April 7th. Some of you guys might remember that this ties into Trump's executive order creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and then I think it was called a digital asset stockpile, if that's the exact terminology off the top of my head. And of course, part of that executive order was like, hey, we actually have to figure out what cryptos we hold. And I think that in this case, there is a good chance that we're going to see XRP, XLM, Chainlink, especially these older cryptos that have been around for a long time. I guarantee that they have some of these cryptos hanging around, even something like HBAR. But I think especially stuff like Stellar, like XRP, these older cryptos that are really established and well known. Chances are that the SEC, or sorry, it could be the SEC, but chances are that U.S. authorities have seized, some of these cryptos in the past, and who knows, they're probably holding quite a bit of XRP, quite a bit of XLM, but they just never took the time to find these assets because they didn't see them as having value. This is the one thing that a lot of people miss, in my opinion, is they neglect the fact that basically what the digital asset stockpile did, and the strategic Bitcoin reserve, is that it basically confirmed that these assets are legitimate and they have value, like on the U.S. government's balance sheet, right? That's the primary reason why they're finding these cryptos. It's just so they can say, hey, we have like, I don't know, $100 million or $200 million of XRP and XLM and HBAR, right? And they can say, so this counts as an asset on our balance sheet. That's the main reason why they're doing this, because it helps kind of like balance the assets and debts, if that makes any sense. It's super interesting. But anyways, guys, moving on now to XLM. Same thing on the monthly chart with the RSI. And honestly, I love this chart so much because, again, we see in the previous cycle, we see a first peak higher, and we see a first peak and a second peak, and then a collapse. And here we can see that we got the first peak on XLM. And what's pretty crazy is this first peak actually got into the 90 handle range, which suggests that the second peak could be a little bit lower. That would create a bearish divergence with the price, and of course a rollover. But again, guys, the main thing to point out here is that even with a slight difference in the two peaks here, you can see that in the first peak, I guess XLM got to 20 cents, and then the second peak, it rallied all the way up to 80 cents. So it was a massive move, massive difference between those two peaks. And I think we're going to see something similar here, where, right now, I guess in that first peak, XLM got up to around 55 cents or 60 cents, let's say 65 cents. So in that second peak, it could easily, rally all the way back up to $1. I think that's a really logical price target. I think it's one that I mentioned in last week's video in terms of a cycle top. And again, I do think that this is something that's going to be hit over the summer. And again, like even using this basic technical analysis, we can look at the, again, not to give anyone PTSD, but we have a starting point of 10 cents, let's say, resistance, let's say, I don't know, somewhere between 55, 60 cents. And of course, that gives us a target of 95 cents roughly when you you take the difference between these two levels and you add it to 55 cents here, and you end up, of course, with a price target somewhere around $1. Easy, but especially when you zoom out. But of course, on shorter term time frames, you can get really messed up. And I'm someone who likes to think a little bit more long term. I'm not necessarily a day trader, in case you haven't noticed. I'm more someone who buys and holds. And if you're someone who's like that too, then I do hope you're finding this information helpful. Anyways, this I guess this ties in to the whole stuff about ETFs. I was actually trying to look and see, when exactly is the approval date, because of course Hedera also has ETFs that are in progress. I was trying to figure out when exactly is the approval date. I was checking in Hedera's Reddit, and there was a few comments here thinking that the ruling could potentially be as soon as May 2025. This is consistent with other headlines I found where people were trying to kind of do like asking AI to say like, hey, it looks like it's going to be approved in May. Can you give an HBAR price target and so on? So it looks like the soonest, I guess I should caution that, the soonest that a spot Hedera ETF could be approved is in May. And I'll remind you guys, and I've said this I think like 10 times now, I'll remind you guys that according to Bloomberg ETF analysts, again, it's not according to me, according to Bloomberg ETF analysts, Hedera has one of the, I think it's Hedera between, I don't know if it's between Hedera and Solana or Hedera and Litecoin, I think it is. Between Hedera and Litecoin, those have the highest chance of being approved by the SEC because they have the least amount of like regulatory scrutiny, or in the past rather. I know like with XRP now, like the appeal was dropped and all that stuff. But all that being set aside, according to Bloomberg ETF analyst, HBAR is basically in like the top 3 altcoins that should be getting a spot altcoin ETF first. And this is something I've been saying for weeks, and I'm going to continue saying it. Repetition is key so that you guys remember it, and so that you don't get surprised, when we go over the chart here and we see another massive move higher in HBAR. So this is where things get interesting. I guess I don't want to say necessarily in contrast to XRP and XLM, but similarly, you could see that in HBAR's case, there was kind of like a 3-peak type of pattern, in the previous cycle. You can see there was a first peak here, then a second peak, and then a third peak, which was lower. Of course, that created a bearish divergence, and that's why HBAR rolled over. Here we can see a similar thing playing out with a first peak sometime early last year, and then we have the second peak here coming in late last year, and of course that means we're probably going to get a third peak later in the year. And what's interesting is I think, we'll have to wait and see, but I do think that this third peak could actually go back up into the 90 handle range, especially because the second peak didn't get quite in there. Of course, in the first cycle, HBAR did get into that like 90 handle range, up I think to 95 there if I'm seeing correctly. So it got all the way to 95, which is extremely overbought. But in this time around, the second peak was only around 85, 86, something like that. So the idea that the third move could be even bigger and take HBAR all the way up into the 90 range, I think is possible. And again, like just looking at this pattern here, we can use our very basic target math, starting point to 5 cents, resistance somewhere around 30 cents. Of course, that gives us a difference of 25 cents, which would give us a potential top of around 55 cents or somewhere in that neighborhood, 55, 60 cents. But the one thing to keep in mind, guys, is that what we're looking at here, and I think it's actually similar. Yeah, it's actually similar in XLM's case, but in HBAR's case, what's actually here? Let me take a quick look. No, so in HBAR's case, is a little bit different in the sense that, sorry, I'm like scattered a little bit here, guys. But what I'm trying to say is that what you're looking at here is a massive cup and handle pattern that's playing out. So when HBAR gets back up to this, let's say 45, 40 cent range, and if it continues powering higher, then what you're doing is you're taking basically the whole level, like down from here from 5 cents all the way up here to around 45 cents. And then next thing you know, actually, wow, it is actually going to get close to $1, right? And I do think that that's going to happen. And of course, on a percentage return basis, that would mean that HBAR would have the highest percentage returns compared to XRP or XLM, right? And this is something I've been saying literally for months, and I'm going to continue saying it. But key point being is that I do foresee a third wave higher here in the RSI, and especially because it's going to probably get into that 90 handle range, the rally in HBAR could be truly explosive. And again, the way that I'm playing that personally, I should make it clear, I don't hold HBAR personally, but I do hold altcoins in Hedera's ecosystem because I do think that they're going to benefit substantially when HBAR goes crazy. And you can become a member of the CoinVero Club to find out which ones those are. But point being, guys, yeah, like HBAR is looking really good. All these cryptos are looking really good. I was actually pleasantly surprised when I was throwing on the RSI indicator on all these three cryptos, and I was thinking, yeah, like this is lining up real nice, consistent with a huge rally sometime over the summer. And I do think, and again, guys, it's like just look in the history here. It's just all it takes is 2 or 3 months, and you have a massive, massive, massive rally. So now we're kind of seeing, I would argue, potentially like a bottoming pattern here around a key level of around 15 cents, and with a nice 3 stars in the south pattern. It's one that you can see on almost every single crypto, and I do think that foreshadows, just like in May of 2021 or June or July of 2021, you're going to see just like a 3 to 4 months of just like ripping higher. Again, is that going to start next month or the month after? Who knows? But in the coming months, I do believe that will start. And by the end of the summer, we will have all the cycle highs in for all these cryptos and for others. Anyways, guys, if you did make it this far and you did find that information helpful, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, ping that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.